something as radically as the way you cost and run the BBC, then you're going to get some of this. And I think it has some of it's been unfortunate in that it gives us slogans which are misunderstood, and it makes it look as if actually what you're more interested in that than the program purposes of the place. Now, all that is only to make the program purposes of the place as lively and as energetic and as valuable to the public as possible.
Why do you see it so differently?
I've just finished working with the people, BBC staff, on Midnight Movie, and there's no question. You see, I know it's a fact. You see, I know I'm not exaggerating, and I know it's not cheap jibes. I'm not a single exaggeration in my piece of watching, listening, hearing BBC staff who are working on the film. And you know the unhappiness and the confusion. And I mean, it's just absolutely the case, without a shadow of doubt or a word of a lie. People at the BBC are unhappy, confused, frightened. Now, you can have all your management committees and committees to advise managers and your weekends away in whatever hotels to discuss management strategy. And at the same time, you can start destroying and stripping out the creative heart of the BBC. Which is why I got angry, which is why I say if the BBC cannot look after public service broadcasting, let's have other public service broadcasting and break it up. Because what has to happen, and you said about personnel, what has to happen is, well, all right, Hussey has to go, Birt has to go, have to have a new look at the whole thing in terms of the genuine traditions of the BBC, and what I want to see is the BBC start defending it. So you say, we have to do this. You say, we have to. I want somebody at the BBC to get up and say, make us. We'll take you on. You're a politically temporary, vicious political movement moving against us, and we say, F you. Come on then. You know, instead of going on and giving up, hands in the air straight away. And that's what the BBC did, I'm afraid.
Why aren't you doing what Dennis suggests?
Quite a lot of it's been done, but clearly not well enough. But, I mean, the notion that you can just raise two fingers to the rest of the world and tell it to go away and believe that it will, it seems to me to be a complete fantasy.
Well, try it, though.
No, well, I honestly, apart from anything else, I think it's unrealistic, it would be suicidal, and I don't think it's right for an organisation that's paid for, as I say, by all the public who have to pay, to take no notice of what's being learned around the country, indeed around the world, about how you can make your money go further, and you can get better value for it, and you can then make more programmes, and then you can do the only thing that you're there for better, which is to make programmes for the viewers and listeners of this country.
So you think low morale and the murmurings and the allegations of fear within the BBC and people not wanting to speak, that's all symptoms of an uncomfortable period of change, and all will come right and all will be golden again?
Well, I'm pretty optimistic, I must say. In a
Are
year
you really?
Yeah, I am optimistic. And I'm just finished, please. Of course we've got some of the jargon wrong. Of course you're making this kind of change. And it's not just to appease a government, it's actually to try and run the place better. You talk about management culture and poo-poo it. Well, okay, but frankly, if good management is running somewhere well rather than badly, if good management is about making more programs available, more money available to program makers, rather than on the bureaucrats who are behind every cupboard, as you say in your day, then frankly, I'll plead guilty. And I don't think we've got any alternative. And frankly, once you think you can see a way you can do it, you have a public duty to the people who are paying you to ensure that you do that. And why? It's all because of the programs. Perhaps we haven't shouted often enough and long enough and loud enough and in as wonderful a language as you were able to use about programs and what it means to us and what that ought to mean, and we hope it means to the people of this country. And we need to do more of that and better. We have been doing it, but the strain is great, a lot's underway, and perhaps that is the signal we should take away. But as I do say, I think there has been a turn in the BBC this year, without it. Certainly the past few months, as we're debating programs as never before, and I think we need to find ways of turning that into a language that our program makers and indeed people like yourselves who are listening, let alone the viewers and listeners, hear it and recognize it, because I promise you that's what it's all about and that's what it's all for.
I first saw television when I was in my late teens. It made my heart pound. Here was a medium of great power, of potentially wondrous delights that could slice through all the tedious hierarchies of the printed word and help to emancipate us from many of the stifling tyrannies of class and status and gutter press ignorance. We're privileged if we can work in this, the most entrancing of all the many palaces of variety. Switch on, tune in, and grow. I wouldn't dispute for one wayward whistle or crackle that the BBC of my childhood was not paternalistic and often stuffily pompous. It saw itself in an almost priestly role. But at a crucial period of my life, it threw open the magic casement on great bounces of mindscape, at a time when books were hard to come by, when I'd never stepped into a theatre or a concert hall and would have been scared to do so even if given the chance. Of course, the characteristic media ploy of separating the popular from the serious, which often means the distinction between the solemn and the lively, and not just the truncheon-like measuring rod of class and educational status. Of course, yes, that process had already begun with the split between the home service and the light program. But such a parting of the ways was nothing like as rigidly mapped out as it is nowadays, where listeners are presumed to be walking about with one of the digits 1 to 5 tattooed like cattle brands on their high, middling, low, lower, and yet lower brows. On the old light program, you could suddenly, maybe reluctantly, collide with a play or a discussion or an embryonic drama documentary, the now totally pervasive assumptions of the marketplace, which have stiffened into something close to natural law, had not by then removed the chance of being surprised by something you didn't know, or better still, by something you didn't know that you knew, something you didn't know that you knew. Only connect, said E.M. Foster, that great novelist whom Murdoch's nasty little rag would presumably dismiss as an artsy-fartsy old pufter. But yes, what a good word. Connect. Connect. The verb which far better than the merely technical transmit is, if not actually, certainly what should be the defining activity of all television, especially that threatened and peculiarly self-threatened section, which has no need, and indeed no remit, to package up A, B, or C defined groups of the allegedly passive on behalf of predatory advertisers. The section of broadcasting which, above all else, and quite separately from any temporarily dominant political language or so-called management culture, must continually remind itself that it is not a business trying to distribute dosh to its shareholders, not owned by its current administrators, not a company entitled to build Chinese walls around its momentary practices, but something held in trust and in law for every citizen of this misgoverned and too long abused group of nations we, for probably a few decades more, call Great Britain and Northern Ireland. That once you get into sort of sector of the market thoughts about television, basically cost accountant driven, delivering up sections of an allegedly passive audience in chunks to advertisers, you do start thinking about what the audience want, and you do start getting machine-made formulaic dramas, and so you can see it. People are getting fed up with the kind of television we're seeing because you can see the handle cranking up and it's all so bloody predictable.
Is that
because it's delivering up public service broadcast or any real broadcast shouldn't think of delivering up an audience. It reaches an audience. And it reaches it by the passion and the conviction in which it does what it does, which makes an audience respect and respond to it. That's what working in television